Big Brother, mainstream media, government cover-ups. You want answers? Well, so does he. Live from Austin, Texas, broadcasting worldwide, it's Alex Jones.
Many have dubbed Ike as the most controversial speaker on the planet. Much of what he's talked about in the last 20 years has unfortunately come true. He deals with this false programmed matrix reality of disinformation we're fed. And his latest book is Human Race, Get Off Your Knees, The Lion Sleeps No More, DavidIke.com. And David, serious times coming, rebellion worldwide. But the globalists, strangely, admit that they're behind it. Do they know the rebellion was already coming, so they're trying to trigger it? So kind of like Red Adair would blow up an oil well once it was already on fire to extinguish the flames of revolution? What does David Ike think is happening?
Well, I think what we're seeing, Alex, is a classic reformation or confirmation of something that anyone that wants to understand what's going on in the world must keep at the front of their mind, and that is no situation is ever black and white. It's always, if you're looking for the real truth, it's a shade of grey, and that's what we're looking at here. We have, understandably, I believe, a genuine uprising from angry, poverty-stricken, oppressed and suppressed people. But when people are in that situation where, as we talked about before, freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose. When you reach that point where you've got nothing to lose if you take certain action, then suddenly you lose your fear, because what have I got to lose? I'm in this situation anyway. Now, because of the massive economic collapse and catastrophe around the world, people in all parts of the world, not just the Middle East, are feeling that, and they're heading closer and closer to that line that says, I've got nothing to lose, let's go. Now, of course, the mind manipulators, because that's what it is in the end, a mind game, a psychological game, they knew that this was coming, and they have got to try to manage it for their own ends. So here we have, Alex, a genuine reaction to this 30 years of suppression and violence and tyranny by this U.S. and no doubt British too, the two go together, tyranny and dictator Mubarak, who has served their interests and served the interests of Israel against the interests of the Palestinians. And that is a genuine reaction, no doubt. But you can see that when you've got a powder keg like that of resentment and oppression that will not take it anymore, then it's very easy to trigger that and then manipulate it. And that's why when the revolution truly comes to America and Britain, as it will, then we, involved in any of that, need to learn the lessons and become streetwise about the way this thing works. Because how many times, when you look at these so-called people's revolutions, not least in the former Soviet Union, of Georgia, of Ukraine, of the Czech Republic, of Kyrgyzstan, and so on, these color revolutions, as they call them, again and again, it's been shown quite clearly that Rothschild-connected people like George Soros and Zbigniew Brzezinski have been behind them, not least Soros's network of foundations that are not there for philanthropy. They are there to manipulate so-called, on the surface, people's revolutions that are putting their people in power. And you cannot ever judge the true nature of a revolution, its motivation and its background, until we see what has replaced the regime the revolution has removed. And when you look at Georgia and Ukraine and all these places where these Soros networks have been involved in the manipulation, and not only that, the training of people in people's non-cooperation and protest techniques. The people that have gone into place have been invariably people who are front men for the very the globalists and the Soros networks. Classic Georgia, Mikhail Saakashvili, scholarship to the U.S., Columbia Law School, George Washington University, New York law firm, turns up and becomes president of Georgia after the so-called Rose Revolution manipulated by the Soros foundations. We have this extraordinarily ludicrous situation now in the Ukraine, where I'm speaking next week, where a guy called Viktor Yanukovych was removed after what was claimed to be rigged elections in, I think it was 2004, the so-called Orange Revolution. That very man is now president of the country. So that revolution, of course, changed nothing with hindsight. And when you look at the situation now in Egypt, who turns up, not lived in the country for most of his adult life?
Mohammed El-Baradei, the head of the UN.
And who is this man? He's been on the board of the International Crisis Group, which claims on its website to be an independent, non-profit, non-governmental organization committed to preventing and solving deadly conflict, when it's actually there to manipulate regime change in the very way that I'm talking about.
And they now admit that they sent him in the week before. They admittedly triggered it. They're bragging about it while publicly saying that they support Mubarak because they know Western support for Mubarak will enrage the populace even more, but then publicly at the same level admit that they're doing it. And so this is what I wanted to ask you, David. I want you to continue. Do you agree with my analysis here? Because I knew this a decade ago because I saw them bragging about it, but now they've come out in Wired magazine, you name it, and admitted Google is NSA software for keyword. They just get you to search the database to put your own information on it, so they literally know what you're thinking and doing. And Google says 93 to 99% of the time, they know where you're going to eat, what you're going to surf, what you're going to do, more than you even know, and they're able to predict the future. It's a scientific crystal ball to a certain extent by tracking mass movements of people, and they knew that there was rebellion against all their dictators forming, and so they're going to trigger it early to then bring their people back in, and that's basically what's happening. But we'll put up on screen those articles about Google is now claiming they're getting companies where they can do this. That's what they've been set up to do all along. That's why the globalists are so arrogant, is because they literally do nothing but study humanity and how we operate.
Yeah, well, the International Crisis Group, board members, chairman George Soros, Mohammed El-Baradei, Wesley Clark, say no more, Javier Solana, the NATO Secretary General as was, Zbigniew Brzezinski is one of their senior advisors, Richard Armitage, for goodness sake, and Prince Turki Al-Faisal, who is a member of the Saudi Arabia royal family, who, of course, love democracy and freedom, which this International Crisis Group is supposed to represent. So you look at that, and it's quite clear that El-Baradei's their man. Now, also, the Daily Telegraph in Britain has been running stories and articles about the fact that some of the people that were that triggered this popular uprising, which in its entirety, that's what it is from the people's point of view, were actually connected to the American embassy in Cairo and came to America and all the rest of it. So you can see how it's being manipulated. And the thing is that people like Brzezinski in his books, they are telling you what's going to happen, disguised as prophecy, if you like.
Kissinger came out on Bloomberg last night and said this is only the first scene in the first act of a play.
That's exactly what I was coming to. That quote, this is only the first scene of the first act of the drama that is played out. That is telling you what's coming. And you see, I've been writing for years about the fact that these Arab oil states and these Arab dictatorships and royal dictatorships were being played like a violin. It was only a matter of time. And again, you come to the shades of grey. Should the dictators and royal tyrannies in Yemen, Algeria, Libya, Jordan, Syria, Morocco, Saudi Arabia.
Stay there, David. We got to break it. Powerful info. We're going to look at the geopolitical map when we come back. By the way, Just a broadcast note. Joining us Thursday, George Norrie is going to be on the broadcast, giving us his take on what's happening with the world economy and what's happening in Egypt. But I could not concur the piercing understanding of David Icke Moore on this issue. That's why I admire him so much. His research is always so up to date. And piercing is the word, and that's exactly what's happening. Instead of even black or white or gray, it's more of a prism of spectrums. And the globalists are riding this tiger of rebellion against their own tyranny, and like judo, using the resistance of the population against them and then throwing it back at them. And so by understanding this, though, we can defeat them. And I want to talk more about their predictive systems, future predicting systems, and how David thinks we counter that. But David, continuing, you got cut off by the break. You were running through the dictatorships that are in the Middle East, North Africa, and where this is going.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about Yemen, Algeria, Libya, Jordan, Syria, Morocco, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Oman, Kuwait. All these are so-called royal dictatorships and tyrannies imposing upon the people. So should they go? Absolutely they should go. But we're back to, and as soon as possible, but we're back to shades of grey. The question is not just should they go, it's what is the agenda for making them go at this time? And, you know, there's a number of things that come from this. If they, as Kissinger has indicated here, they plan to create falling dominoes across the Middle East, first of all, that creates massive upheaval. It creates what? Chaos. What is their technique? Order out of chaos. Now, on one level, this could be very dangerous for places like Israel, but it could also be incredibly beneficial to those that run Israel, and very, very beneficial to those behind this global agenda, because they want the Middle Eastern countries in a state of subordination, and chaos will create that. The other thing is that where does most of the world's oil come from? It comes from the Middle East. You start whacking domino upheavals across the Middle East and the oil countries, not least the big one, Saudi Arabia. And what are you going to have, Alex? You're going to have an enormous oil crisis, which is going to, of course, knock on to crises and financial crises and industrial crises and living crises throughout global society, which is precisely what they want. Massive problems and upheavals and chaos for which they can offer the solutions of their centralized global fascist Orwellian dictatorship. So it's clear to me that this genuine reaction to this disgraceful, outrageous, evil attack on human society is being managed to bring about the next stage of the attack on human society.
Expanding on that, we know in the last year the IMF and World Bank have ordered all of these third world countries, not just the Middle East, North Africa, to cut through austerity the bread ration, which around half the population of Egypt is on, making $2 or less a day. And so they economically, through globalism, pull the levers, punch the buttons. Then they send in their man on a white horse, who the London Independent calls the savior,
exactly.
This El Baradi. So it's completely transparent to those that study this and know it, and the globalists are even admitting it. But on a larger front, the Muslim Brotherhood in Jordan, they just reshuffled the government towards them. In Saudi Arabia, everywhere, the Saudis and others are freaking out, realizing the deal they made with the globalists is a deal with the devil, and they want the strategy of tension, the clash of civilizations. They want to get radical Muslims, like they got rid of Saddam and put radical Muslims in Iraq. This is the strategy to then build them up as the enemy and to blame them for the exploding oil prices that were already being triggered via dollar devaluation.
Yeah, that's it. And the Muslim Brotherhood, you know, this is, again, I keep coming back to this today, shades of grey, becoming streetwise. And just because something has a name on the door and appears to stand for something does not mean that at its core it does.